All right. Well, there's lots of new hit musicals coming out this spring as Tony season heats up. And one of the biggest hits is Ain't Too Proud. I'm sitting here, I'm Sam Eckmann from Gold Derby, talking with Derrick Baskin, the lead, who's playing Otis Williams, giving a tremendous performance. Thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Hey, Sam, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for hanging backstage with me.
It's great. You have been involved with the show. You're playing Otis Williams, and
Yeah,
you've been involved since basically day one,
yeah.
for a long time. Has it, over that time, do you find that you've grown, you've adopted similarities to Otis, that you've kind of blended with him as an actor? And
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I, tackled this role, I didn't, know too much about him as a man. Of course, I knew he was this iconic figure in this iconic group, but I didn't, know his personality or, any of his quirks or anything. And doing the show and talking with him and visiting, he's been to the show, I mean, dozens and dozens of times. And then outside of that, we've hung out like several times. And it's a bit eerie and a bit like weird that we're very similar. Our temperaments are very similar, which I thank God it kind of allows me to get into the role a little bit easier because a lot of the decisions that he had to make as the leader of the group, as a guy who kind of held this group together, I kind of understand where he's coming from just based on our personalities. So yeah, in the beginning, I didn't think I was like him at all. We don't look similar at all, So I was like, well, there's probably nothing else really similar to him. But then, in talking to him, he's just such a warm heart. He's a family man. I'm a family man. He, is very spiritual. I also am very spiritual. And, he is very grateful for what I really like about him is like uh, he loves music. He loves art. And he loves kind of what that can do to someone that he shares his art with. And so I kind of like really gravitated toward that part of him. And I really wanted to show his heart and his affection for music and his affection for art and his affection for allowing that art to maybe touch someone else.
did you get to talk to him at all while you were working on this?
Yeah. So we did our first workshop of this in 2017. We did a 7-week workshop here in the city, here in New York. And I met him. He was going to come to a presentation of just the first act. This is his life story, so we didn't want to give him the whole thing all at once. And so I met him then, and I was terrified to meet this guy. I've never played a real guy before. And so I was nervous about kind of, his opinion of my portrayal of him, his opinion of how we're telling the story of the Temptations. But then once I met him, he's just this warm guy, and he has my number. He calls me all the time. He checks in on me to make sure that I'm healthy, that I'm, doing well. And then we just talk, we sit and we talk, and he is just completely open with his life and his life stories and the things that they've gone through. He tells me about the time, one of his favorite places to perform is actually at the Apollo, which is uptown from here. And he tells us about life on the road. And he's just been such a wealth of knowledge. And, we performed on Jimmy Fallon on opening night, and he was there. So I'm sitting backstage with him, and then he just goes into these stories about, man, in the 50s and the 60s, we would do this, and this. And this is like, opening night. We've have done the show for about 2 years at this point, and he's still like just giving knowledge out. He's still just giving it. And it's just really a blessing to have someone that has this wealth of knowledge that's willing to share it, and is very open. He's been very open. He's been very candid about his life and about the stories of the Temptations.
What was your relationship like with the Temptations music growing up?
Yeah, well, every Christmas every single Christmas, we turn on the Temptations Christmas album. It's like, you know, Christmas didn't start until we heard Silent Night, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And so that was my first introduction to the Temptations. But this is my this music is my parents' music. It's my grandfather's music. And so I grew up hearing the stories of the Temptations, since I can remember. But that Christmas album, man, like you know how like a song can just take you back to a moment, or you can like, I can literally see, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, right? So I can see like our stockings hanging on. We used to keep it on the stair banister. And I can literally, I hear Temptations Christmas music, and it takes me right back to that moment.
And going back now, because I read that you have a BA in biology. So how did you make the leap from that and wind up on stage?
It's true, man. This life is just so interesting. And it can be such an adventure, I think, if you just allow life to present opportunities. You know what I mean? And so, I went to Hampton University. I wanted to be a doctor. I probably would have been a family practitioner, family doctor, or a neuro surgeon. Like, it was one of those two. And so I was applying to medical schools and graduate schools. And I just, I didn't want to have any regrets. And I grew up in church. I grew up singing. And so I was like, well, maybe you want to see what happens, try to make an album, or maybe sing jingles and commercials. I've always loved singing jingles and commercials. I was like, maybe do that before you go to medical school, because, once you do that, that's it. There's no turning back from that. And so I was in St. Louis. I was staying with my grandfather at the time, and I bought a one-way ticket to New York City. And I didn't know anyone here, and I didn't know what I was actually going to do. But I just knew, in order to allow the door to present itself, I had to be in a place where there were a lot of doors. And so I was like, let's just go to New York and let's just see what happens. And so, I started my first job. I got transferred. I used to work downtown TGI Fridays in St. Louis. And so I got transferred to the one here on 50th and 7th. And so my new friends in New York were these aspiring actors. And I didn't really, acting and Broadway it was a dream that kind of found me. Sometimes you have dreams, and I think sometimes life says, what about this? And it was moving to New York was the best decision I made for my life, for my happiness, for my sanity. And so my new friends, they were these aspiring actors and artists. And so they drug me to this open call for Rent. And I didn't know what Rent was. I had never seen it. I had never seen a Broadway show at this point. And so I go to this open call. They tape the call. They tape the audition. I'm on the evening news that day. And I started getting callbacks for this Rent. And I was like, what is this thing I'm getting called back for? I have no idea. I really didn't know. And so I was like, well, let's at least go look at, what you're auditioning for. And so I went to see it. I won the lottery. So I was in the front row, and something just clicked, something just clicked. And I was like, oh, I can do that. That I can do. And it's the speaker on. Give me a second. Hold on.
Okay.
I when I saw that show, I was like, I can do that. That's what I'm here to do. And once I saw that show, then things started, like, I want to say internally, like it started the ball moving. You know what I mean? So I kept getting auditions. I was like, well, okay, well, you can't just do a Broadway show. You have to do something. So I started, I took my first acting class was this like improv class. And then I met this girl in this class who introduced me to I got out of TGI Fridays. I started, she introduced me, her roommate was his booker for a catering company. And so she got me a job with them, where I met this other girl who had this National Dunkin' Donuts commercial. And I was like, oh my God, I saw you on TV. This is amazing. And I'm like friends with someone who's on TV. And I was like, how did you get that job? And so she was like, oh, my agent. She was like, do you want to meet her? She literally just introduces me to her agent. And I was like, all right. And at this point, I'm thinking that that's how it works. You know, I was like, it's how it works. You just meet somebody you work with. They have a national commercial and they introduce you to their agent, and that's it. So I had a passport picture blown up, which was my first headshot. And I had no credits because I had never acted before. So I kind of lied and I kind of lied. I out and out lied. I out and out lied about some credits. I made up some stuff. And she was like, okay, this is obviously not, true, but you have something and I'm willing to work with you. And she actually got me my first Broadway show, which was 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And then from there, Tara Rubin, who actually cast this show, she cast that show. She cast my first Broadway show, and she put me in my second Broadway show, which was The Little Mermaid. So it was just like, just doors of opportunity would open. And I never quite knew what I was going to do, once I went through the door. But it just turns out that I was equipped to handle whatever was thrown at me. Yeah.
Well, those shows you spoke of, you've done Spelling Bee, you were in Memphis, another Best Musical winner.
Yeah.
But this is your first lead role. And the show is about 2.5 hours long, and you're on stage the entire time. You do not leave.
Yeah.
What has been the most daunting, different thing about that for you?
Just, well, there's been a few daunting things. I would say the first thing is just physically. I've never had to have the stamina to carry a show. You know what I mean? I never leave the stage. I'm in every scene of the show. And that requires physically just to be as much in shape as possible. I just got in from the gym. I have to do some kind of cardio. I have to do some kind of stretching. I have to hydrate. Before we broadcast, I was like, I got to drink this coconut water. So I have to physically prepare myself for this feat of carrying the show. Also, what I didn't realize is that once you're the lead of the show, the cast is also looking for your leadership on stage, but also off stage. There's a few of us in the cast. It's their Broadway debut. I'm not the oldest in the cast, but I'm the second oldest. And so outside of that, I've been through some things and people know that. And so they seek my wisdom. They seek my advice on certain things on stage and off stage. How to do a particular scene. And I've just never have been in the position to be an advisor to kind of like younger actors. I've never been that guy that an entire cast looks toward for leadership. I've just never been in this situation. Also, it just takes a lot. This character that I play, he's the last living temptation, right? And so you have to be equipped emotionally and spiritually, because you're talking about essentially 4 or 5 gentlemen that have come into your life and that have left your life. And so I have to live that, and I have to live that in my truth. And in order to do that without it completely like breaking me down emotionally and spiritually, I have to ground myself. Mm-hmm. I have to make sure that I honor the story. I have to make sure that I honor this man. And that, for me, that comes with prayer. I pray a lot. I try to read my Bible and just, something to ground me. I listen to a lot of music. Love Stevie Wonder. Sometimes I turn on some classical music, and anything to just ground me emotionally to steer the ship, because that's what I'm doing. I'm steering this huge, and this show is not small. It's a big show, and I honestly never thought I would be in the position to carry a show, because someone who honestly looks like me doesn't necessarily have quite as many opportunities to be a lead in this capacity. And so I have to honor that, and to be able to say, hey, I'm a Black man, I'm leading this huge Broadway show, that gives me pride, but it also gives me a responsibility to other young actors of color who, you know, I can be an example to them to say, hey, you know what, I can lead a show, or I can be a principal in the show. We have five lead guys, and they're all Black men, and uh, two of them. I'll say Ephraim Sykes and Jeremy Pope. They're pretty much the same kind of type of guy. They've been mistaken for each other plenty of times, and so the opportunity for them to work together, as opposed to, well, it's either me or it's either you. These opportunities for us, for Black men, they're just kind of rare. And so I'm kind of just really living in this moment and knowing that, this opportunity, hopefully it's a beacon for other actors to say this opportunity can also happen for me as well. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, one of the points where you make great use of the opportunity is at the end of the show, which I wanted to ask you about, because Otis, as you said, he is the last surviving original member. He's sort of left behind to tell the story of his friends. And you get this really incredible moment where, a lot of the show is group numbers.
Yeah.
But then you get to break away and have this solo moment, which is incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
What is it like to perform that, and how do you gear up for that moment, having been on stage the entire time?
Yeah, that moment, it's also one of my favorite moments. When that moment happens toward the end and there's me on stage and there's silence, that's when I can have, that's when I know if the audience has gone along with me for the journey. And it's one of the moments where I can really feel the emotion of the audience. And so that it makes it like, it's I can't wait to get to that moment. You know what I mean? To have that, it's almost tangible. You can feel kind of the symbiotic relationship, because up until then I've taken you along this journey, and there are like, posts along the journey that I'm like, okay, they're with us, and that moment to me is the biggest post to say that the audience is completely with me. But what I really try to do in that moment specifically, in order for it to work for me, I have to actually do the opposite of what you would think you have to do, which is like, you really need to focus. You really want to make this thing work. And so what I have to actually do is relax. I have to surrender to the moment. I have to allow that moment to be what it is in that particular day. I don't want to ever recreate anything. I always want to create the art. And so whatever that moment is, that day, I allow it. And it's kind of scary because you have to be vulnerable. You don't know what that moment's going to present, because at this point, then I'm on the ride as well. I don't know how I'm going to react in that moment. And so it stretched me as an artist, but I just love just allowing this moment to happen. And also it's a moment of, you can hear the emotion, you can hear the sadness of the audience, but then I think it also allows for healing. I think we don't shy away from, the hard subjects that you may want to shy away from in musicals. The show is not always shiny. We tackle some really hard subjects. And so sometimes people can relate to the subjects that we're attacking. And I think the moment that I have on stage, I think it also allows for healing. I think it allows for healing for my character. It allows for healing for me as an artist. Just to being able to surrender to such a huge moment, learning to surrender to that kind of moment, I think is something that every actor should learn and should know. And I just hope that every actor has that opportunity to to learn to surrender, to allow the moment to happen. But I think it also allows healing for anything that has maybe been brought up for an audience member. We talk about loss. And so a lot of times parents who come to see the show, it makes them think of their children. Parents, people who have lost their parents, people our age who have lost their parents. I think the moment that I have at the end of the show, it allows for healing. And I love when that can happen. I love when art can heal. I love when art can touch you. I love when art can kind of allow you to escape your reality, but also help you deal with your reality. I think that's what we're doing here. And I hope that we're like touching lives with what we're doing.
Well, it's a beautiful way to end the show. And I will have to end it here so I can let you go back and prepare for your matinee and get hydrated.
Gotta do a few scales.
But everyone stay subscribed to Gold Derby so we can keep you up to date on Broadway news during Tony season. And Derrick, best of luck. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Of course.